and welcome to the Best Games of 1997 edition of Talk Shop. I am your host, DM Schmeier, and with me is TJ Hafer, and we are here to break down our all-out entry into the golden age of gaming, in my opinion. It's had many eras, but I don't know that anything has ever been quite as amazing, new, and mind-busting as the next 4 or 5 years of gaming history. I've had years I enjoyed just as much, but this next half a decade is kind of where I became a gamer, to the point where my parents were telling me to turn off machines.
I don't know that I would say that gaming has one single golden age. I think, if anything, it's had multiple golden ages, but I can definitely see in the period from, I don't know if starting necessarily in 97, maybe 1996 to 2001, if I had to pick a 5-year time frame. Or even going back like 95 to 2000 maybe. It's tough because there's a lot of overlap between like seeing stuff that I really enjoy, the genesis of it happening. I don't know that I could really pick. I could maybe pick a single decade. I could maybe say 1995 to 2005 is the genesis of most of the genres I enjoy. But it would be hard to pick like a single 5-year golden age.
The masterpieces of this time, they tower over the rest, in my opinion. As I fill out these lists, I'm amazed at how beyond Mass Effect, I'm not seeing too much. Beyond Mass Effect and Witcher 3, I'll say, in the last.
I was gonna say, okay, if you exclude Witcher 3, maybe I can see where Mass Effect and Witcher 3, maybe I can see where you're coming from.
The masterpieces here, they just tower.
Yeah.
I mean, these are such titanic achievements. When you look at our honorable mentions,
yeah,
they're incredible freaking games.
Yeah.
Honorable mention was sort of our way before this to usually shout out good games that did something unique or did something cool, but without really managing to be a cohesive experience. Right now, our honorable mentions, in my opinion, are titans in their genres on their own, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and we're classing it up with some Java Mate.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that to your liver every podcast.
I did actually, shortly before we started recording, I finished a Weldworks Hefeweizen, which is a
I can't do that to my liver every podcast.
Fantastic unfiltered German wheat beer from Greeley, Colorado, which is about 20 minutes or so from where we used to live up north in the Loveland area.
We have a long night of work ahead of us, not just recording this podcast. So we are drinking highly caffeinated tea. It is bitter. It is intense. It is fair trade. A lot like many philosophers throughout history we admire.
I actually think this is fairly smooth. I don't taste too much bitterness in this particular blend. We are, of course, traitors to our country, drinking tea because we ran out of coffee.
That's all good.
Tea belongs in a harbor, not in your stomach.
We import the tea.
Yeah.
They tax the tea. I have no idea why my Sons of Liberty impression is John F. Kennedy, but it works. It works. I mean, they were all from Boston, so it works.
Yeah.
John Adams.
Yeah.
Signing the Constitution.
But yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about with 97 being a year where the best games from this year are still like in the canon of like some of the first games you'd think of when someone asks you what are the best games of all time.
And the page turns here. I mean, given the historical nature, I think we should approach this a little differently than we have the other episodes. Rather than just go through the list like a countdown, all these games deserve recognitions. We'll sort of start at the bottom and start at the top, but I would like to talk a little bit about where the genre went after some of these titles.
Okay.
Because I feel like these are all seminal. And these were all sort of game changers.
Okay.
More than sort of. They indisputably were. I mean, my number 1 and your number 3 is widely considered to be the JRPG that changed RPGs.
I would say probably until Persona started to get big, it was probably considered the best JRPG of all time, and in many, many circles still is.
And has indisputably, I think, conjured one of, if not the greatest fan followings and fan communities in gaming. I mean, something like 1 million pieces of fan fiction, innumerable fan art images, fan sites. I talk no shit about the contributions of fan communities. I think it's
yeah.
I think it's a spectacular thing
Yeah.
when a work resonates so powerfully with millions of people as such to prompt that. I fill my day with a lot of writing as an author, a screenwriter, all that, and I don't play in other people's worlds ever. And the urge to do so has only ever been fleeting for me. Usually like right on the heels of an experience.
The last time, and again, yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't knock fan fiction at all. The last time I think I actually wrote fan fiction was for the original American release of the first season of the Digimon animated series back in the GeoCities days.
Good
We're
lord.
talking like grade school, early middle school.
Oh my god, grade school. That was grade school. The third,
Yeah.
fourth, fifth
Oh, yeah.
grade.
And
But I felt that feeling. That feeling where it's like you're connecting so powerfully with something and the fire is, flaring in your imagination to such a degree, pardon me, that you have to write in someone else's world. With some of their characters maybe or their rules. I've never been seduced enough by that to produce a work, but I felt the feeling.
I think that there's an opening to dunk on us with what exactly is it that we do with Chronicles, if not strategy game fan fiction.
Yeah, you can. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not ashamed. I'm just saying a game that is so good as to prompt millions of pieces of fan fiction. I'm just saying roundabout. That is a staggering fan impact. Like truly, you kind of as a creator, as a world builder, you have to tip your hat, bend the knee almost. My honorable mentions are kind of a motley crew.
Yeah.
They did not compete for my top 5. I'll say that.
Okay.
That maybe even actually one of the first years I've had where that wasn't the case, where I wasn't flitting 5 and an honorable mention back and forth. These are games that I really enjoyed this year that I thought did awesome things that were not one of the 5 greatest games this year. I'll just go through them real quick.
Sure.
Turok Dinosaur Hunter. It was a 3D shooter with an incredibly massive arsenal. It was glitchy as hell, but it was pretty for the time. It played well, and the weapon variety and the enemy variety was absolutely tremendous. And I think that the modern shooter benefited a lot from that.
The Turok, and I mean, this comes from someone who grew up on Mortal Kombat. The Turok series is one of the first video games I remember where I at times just had to turn 45 degrees away from the screen when certain weapons would go off. Because, man, they came up with some fucked up ways to kill people in that game.
Well, they're not people. They're trans-dimensional alien dinosaurs.
Right,
all right?
Yeah, but the little nano robot swarm that would make their arms and legs blow up and then their head blow up, I was like, okay, that escalated quickly.
I thought this was a gun. It turned out it was a fuck your day up device.
Yes.
All right, which I suppose all firearms are in a way. No, I loved it though for that massive arsenal and for the variety of enemies you could deploy it against.
Yeah.
Diddy Kong Racing.
Oh man,
it's not as good as Mario Kart. I'll say that.
I liked it better than Mario Kart.
I don't think it's as tight.
I almost put it as an honorable mention because it was so freaking deep. It was a massive adventure game with racing being
it was like a racing RPG.
What tied it all together. Yeah, there was so much secret stuff to unlock with the silver coin challenges.
Yeah, different vehicles to drive.
A whole world that I didn't even discover given I was a kid when I played this game until I had the game for over a year. I realized, oh shit, you complete all these challenges and you get to blast off in a rocket to this whole other area I'd never seen before.
A lot of fun, challenging.
Yeah,
it's just a really slick, polished racer.
I barely missed not making my honorable mentions for 97. Yeah.
Just a slick, polished racer, and really good stuff. And Total Annihilation, which is a simple, flawed yet so fun RTS.
Yeah,
so
fun enough that it's my number 2 pick for this year. I actually liked it quite a bit more than.
I mean, it plays so well. I don't think it had a ton of strategic depth. And I thought that the graphics for this era were not anything to write home about. But it was so fun and had such great replayability.
It took place on such an epic scale and made you consider, where your resources were going, where your time was going. I mean, the classic story I always come back to is there's that giant battleship called the Millennium. and we were playing it with your cousin, who we've mentioned multiple times in this. And I asked him, "Can I see what a millennium looks like?" And his response was, "Someday," because it took so damn long to build the thing. No, I thought Total Annihilation was just such a step up in terms of scale and a step up in terms of like thinking on a higher resource-oriented strategic level versus a small skirmish level. It was probably the first RTS to do that.
It was difficult to hoard resources in that game too.
Yeah.
You couldn't just set 12 probes to mine minerals. You had a lot going on.
Well, it had
other games even tried to mimic that, such as the incredibly underrated Empire Earth series.
Oh, yeah.
With its 6 different resources. But Empire Earth, in my opinion, took it too far. The economy became something...
Empire Earth also went completely off the fucking rails after the second game. But yes. Yeah, the first 2 were actually very good.
Except that I thought that the macro economy game was way too in-depth. I don't want to harvest and keep track of 6 resources. I really don't. Mm-hmm. But Total Annihilation, I thought, hit that sweet spot. Mm-hmm. With the difficulty and intensity of resource gathering not ever rising to the level of complexity of resource gathering.
Yeah.
It was just, you couldn't have an army of 1 million of everything. You had to plan, because once you spent something, those resources were not easily recouped.
There were so many different unit types, and it really rewarded the player who chose well with their unit composition, and you could lose an entire match before even meeting the enemy army just because you built the wrong units, which I thought was really interesting. There were so many different tools for so many different roles with air units and water units and hover units eventually. That might have been something that came along in an expansion pack, but it was just a very kind of thought-provoking different RTS that I feel like a lot of great games further down the line, like Supreme Commander, owe a lot to Total Annihilation, which is why I think it's the second best game of 1997.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
What's funny is one of your honorable mentions is my number 2 too.
Yeah, GoldenEye 007.
Arguably the greatest shooter ever, the greatest multiplayer shooter ever.
I would say greatest console shooter ever. I would not even rank it in the top 10 if you include PC shooters in that.
It was such a cultural experience, multiplayer in 007. Mm-hmm. Such a cultural experience that it has its own TV tropes page. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are talking... This experience arguably defined the N64. Going split screen on...
Well, everything that's come after it in terms of console shooters, it uses 007 as a template. Halo probably would not exist in the form that we know if it hadn't been for 007. Call of Duty, it all comes back. The control scheme is still basically the same. The twin stick control scheme.
Even though this was single stick.
GoldenEye. It had...
Yes, but it was
so,
three.
Yeah.
It was a sort of 3-dimensional look up, look down.
Right.
Have the aim stick with the little targeting reticle.
Yeah.
It had the massive arsenal, which is another thing. Just a ton of guns. And the best part about it, in my opinion, was I don't know that any shooter's ever had more depth. I don't know that any shooter's ever had more single-player levels and missions.
That's the thing.
More cheat codes. More ways to replay.
The multiplayer and the single-player were just both so massive. It's the kind of game that we old-timers complain that you don't really see anymore. The amount of secret shit to unlock. The campaign was huge and
long
sprawling.
And difficult.
There were so many multiplayer options, just a shitload of multiplayer options. You could unlock new maps, new rule sets,
new characters,
weird things like paintball mode. Why the hell not? And it was all stuff you had to earn.
Yeah, your weapons
by playing the game well.
Your weapons could be and discovering what those challenges were at sometimes and doing them. I remember. I forget what it was, but I wanted dual weapon mode or something because who did not want to experience the facility with 2 RCP-90s? You want to talk about a dark, violent power fantasy, the facility with twin RCP-90s, where you get in one of those doorways where several dozen people try to get through you and you're just...
Oh, yeah.
And they're going, ah! Because that was the default death noise of Russians in 007.
Apparently, yeah.
All Russians were, ah! Very Wilhelm screamy.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted. But I had to complete I believe this is the right challenge. Someone will fact check me here, and that's okay. I'm sure I'm wrong. This level where you have to blow up like a silo or something. You have to complete that in 7 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And me being like, all right, I've played that level like 20 times. Okay, let's go. Hard. Really friggin' hard. Like, oh my god. And all of a sudden, now you're not only racing against yourself, and it's not just a speedrun challenge, it's you have to shoot well, you have to move well, you have to pick which battles to retreat from. You have to... It was a level of speedrunning that I hadn't really experienced up to the point that I had played it.
Well, and there were these holy grails. Like, unlocking Jaws and Mishkin was a big deal. The silver PP7, the gold PP7.
The golden gun.
Yeah, I mean, if someone came over to your house and you had the gold and silver PP7s, they knew you were on another level. Like,
and
I'm afraid to go against you in multiplayer.
Did you have the temple? The final level of the single-player campaign that you unlock by unlocking just about everything else. Like, getting to play the temple was something I only got to do at a friend's house.
Here's, I think, what part of it might be is that this is an era when you bought maybe... If you were in our situation, you bought maybe like 3 or 4 N64 cartridges a year.
Maybe.
And you
on a good year.
Yeah, and you needed to really spread those out. And I think out of that sort of necessity, we got games like GoldenEye where like you could play this for 2 or 3 years and still not run out of stuff to do. Like, still not really be repeating.
007 is one of those rare 1,000-hour games where you can measure your participation in it in thousands.
I bet I played
hundreds.
at least 1,000 hours of GoldenEye, yeah, for sure.
Incredible. And, it became just a party. It was a party pastime. It's in the gaming lexicon like few games are.
Yep.
And I loved it.
I still remember when there was like a special day where like we earned a class party where we could bring consoles to school, and they let us play 007 as long as we had paintball mode on, because then they could pretend it wasn't blood and we weren't shooting people in the face. So that was
a blast.
That was a fun time.
That was like some charity competition. Who can raise the most money with
box
box tops from cereal? And we were all so enthused at the possibility of playing video games that our class cleaned house. I remember hearing some kids like spending their allowance on cereal just so they could bring in box tops, which, as our understanding of economics has grown more sophisticated, we realize is the very definition of a bad investment. Very finite resources. Shoot, dude, my allowance was $3 a week in 1997. $3 a week. A box of Lucky Charms, 99 cents at that time. Those were the days.
That's 33% of your operating budget.
I know. For a box top. I later learned...
For one box top. You needed a lot of box tops to win
this competition.
The box top competition.
You did, but it was a team effort between 24 kids who don't keep in touch anymore. And to share that one magical afternoon where our lives came together in one paintball-spattered, shoot-'em-up, glorious battle royale. And I'll never forget those children whose names I've forgotten. We shared something special that day.
We should have all pooled within our class our $3, put that into a high dividend mutual fund, taken all of the interest, bought cereal with that.
Absolutely.
Or perhaps gained a controlling interest in General Mills
because
through a hostile takeover.
Because by this time that mutual fund would have matured to truly titanic wealth.
At which point, we're looking at a situation where maybe we don't care about the class party anymore. Maybe we're just going to buy Nintendo, and then we have games, for the rest of our lives.
Some of us are running for president. Some of us are running for prime minister because we had people of Canadian dual citizenship there.
We've got so many board seats that we're needing to send proxies to a lot of these meetings so we can play GoldenEye.
What might have been? What might have been?
What might have been?
What might have been?
Yep.
The rabbit hole, it goes just so deep down some of these scenarios.
It really does.
You know what else was a really deep RPG? Fallout.
So my other two honorable mentions are Fallout and Ultima Online, which are both in that category of they're honorable mentions because I didn't play enough of them, or I didn't play them until much later and haven't actually put in an appreciable amount of time where I feel like I can authoritatively give them a top 5 spot. Fallout, I played the re-release of around the time Fallout 3 came out, and I kind of bounced off of it. I don't think it's aged super well, but I thought it deserved at least an honorable mention for this year because of what it did for RPGs and how well put together it was for its time. If I had been the right age to experience it,
pioneering a setting that produced 3 titanically good games in Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If I had been the right age to appreciate Fallout, which I don't think 8 years old really is the right age to appreciate
that.
Fallout.
I remember trying to play it when I was 9 or 10 and not being able to get past the first 20 minutes of the game. It was so hard and giving up.
Yeah, I probably would have loved it. We missed each other. We didn't sync up at that perfect Benjamin Button point. Unfortunately, me and Fallout 1. And then Ultima Online. Ultima Online, I very distinctly remember. I had no experience with anything like an MMO or like a MUD, like the old textual multi-user dungeons. I had no experience with any of that. When I hear this kid in our art class in 5th grade start to describe to me the premise of Ultima Online, and this sounded like that's too good to be true. It's a big, persistent world with hundreds of people running around, and you can fight dragons and
sorcery,
build houses, and level up and shit. With that,
pure sorcery.
How does that even work? You're crazy. You're from a crazy alternate future universe where you're just making shit up. And then when I finally discovered that no, this is a real thing, my mind expanded so much just from exposure to the concept of an MMO and of where video games could go and what they could become in the future. I was like, this is some next level shit. This is taking us to a new level. And unfortunately, I feel like we've hit kind of a stagnation with MMOs.
I think we've hit a stagnation because we've hit a saturation.
And we've hit saturation. People are fatigued with the EverQuest World of Warcraft kind of model, specifically the World of Warcraft model that everybody's kind of tried to
copy,
emulate, and put their own spin on. It's World of Warcraft, but we glued some macaroni to it. Look, let's tell you about how great this macaroni is and how it makes it so much different from World of Warcraft. But I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we talk about World of Warcraft in about 7 weeks from now, because I can tell you it's definitely going to be on my list. But yeah, Ultima Online was...
It's a cornerstone.
Yeah, I think it was the first successful graphical, massively multiplayer game. There had been massively multiplayer games before this, but a lot of them were text-based, or they just weren't super successful. Ultima Online is the invention of agriculture, if we want to talk about the development of MMOs in terms of milestones in human history. I think people usually point to the development of agriculture as the milestone in human history. Ultima Online is that same tipping point for the MMOs genre, so it deserved at least an honorable mention, even though I've played probably less than a dozen hours.
I can appreciate its historical significance. I haven't played a single minute, and our agreement was not to put games on our list.
Right, exactly. And World of Warcraft was really the first MMO I sunk any appreciable amount of time into, but I think Ultima Online deserves an honorable mention, as will EverQuest, another game that I haven't really played an appreciable amount of. But
our next games we give shout out. First, we both chose different platformers of 97, I see. 97, I think, was a year where experimental platformers were tried.
Yeah.
Platformers that broke a lot of established rules and tried to do something different. I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time on these. I'll just explain why I like mine. You explain why I like yours. I liked Yoshi's Story because I think it is the example of a platformer that tried to throw a curveball. Went full on to the whimsy of the Mario 7, went full on to art and color and simplicity. This game is NES simple. Jump on things, throw eggs on things, eat things, run from left to right, and see beautiful, whimsical art. And it was short, which I thought was a good thing. Like, a game like that should not have been long. I felt like that's a failing when using modern standards and applying them to the early Marios. They're just too long without saves and stuff. Yoshi's Story comes in at like a lean 12 hours, and it was very tight. It was just what it was trying to be, and I had a ton of fun with it, and I thought that deserved extreme plaudits. It's just a well-designed game.
Very interesting art style, too. They kind of took it in a different direction from the other Mario universe games that were happening around the same time, and I thought that was something that lent it a unique personality, for sure. Mine is this almost ended up higher on my list. Most other years it would have been higher on my list because it's my favorite Mega Man game by far, and I know that'll be controversial because it has a divided reputation among Mega Man fans. But Mega Man Legends, I think this is the Ocarina of Time of the Mega Man series. This is the Mario 64 of the Mega Man series. And it's very non-traditional. It's a 3D quasi-RPG open world kinda with dungeon crawling and, character progression to some extent and a little bit of deeper story than most Mega Man games have. But man, I adore Mega Man Legends. It's got a world that you connect with and want to get lost in. It's got this sort of like deeper mystery of like uncovering these archaeological secrets and digging down deeper. It got really creepy towards the end with this enemy that you don't really know much about, and they kind of show up and you don't really find out what their deal is right away, and they're kind of just hanging out like in the middle of everything, and you're like, what is going on here? When you finally do start to uncover their motives, it's like just super weird. It was similar to the feeling I got in a game we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, Majora's Mask, with the sort of the aliens that start abducting people's cattle in Termina. I felt like the ultimate nemesis in Mega Man Legends gave me that same sort of like creepy alien invasion, like what's going on here kind of feel, because of how little information you're given about them and how suddenly they appear on the scene and just how weird and different their art and architecture is.
Definitely a divisive game, though, Mega Man Legends.
It is. But
I myself, I don't know that I've ever played it. So.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's one we got to see if it's on PSN or something and go back to that. I love that we're uncovering all these gems along the way.
Yeah, I've actually got the dig on my games to playlist. Sitting at number 4 right now, so I should get to that by the next couple of months. So
and it had some interesting, like there were some like destructible environments and like environmental persistence.
You got to say, I do know that Mega Man Legends, while it has its fierce critics, it does have its diehard champions.
I think it belongs alongside Ocarina of Time and Mario 64. Like, I think it's in that class, honestly. It's a little bit... I want to say it's a little bit more threadbare in certain places than either of those two games, which is why I would put it the third out of the 3 if I were going to rank them. But it's fantastic game. That series should have stuck around a lot longer than it did. I know they did a Mega Man Legends 2. I never played it because I never owned a console that it came out on. But
the next game we're celebrating, though, Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces, spawned a great series. And here's why I think this game, Dark Forces 2. Yeah. Here's why I think this game is great. It is the weakest of the Jedi Knight games, like mechanically, in my opinion. But it was the first Star Wars game to deliver upon and I do mean the Star Wars power fantasy.
Absolutely.
The X-Wing pilot, it's not the Star Wars fantasy, power fantasy. That's a secondary power fantasy. It's a cool thing. Wanting to be the guy piloting the X-Wing. Come in, Gold Leader. It's cool. You like that. Star Wars X-Wing. You want to fly the Millennium Falcon. Every kid from our generation watching the prequels, when they started coming out in a couple years after this, watching Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, not just A New Hope, with the lightsaber fights and, do or do not, there is no try. We want to be Jedi, man.
Yeah.
We want to throw stormtroopers around and cut into them and oppose Dark Jedi and cross lightsabers with them. In this game, again, with flawed mechanics, which is why I can't rate it like number 1 or number 2. If this game was the technical masterpiece that Jedi Academy was, it competed for number 1.
Yeah.
It delivered. It went all out. And I love that it went all out. It was like, we know this is what you want, Star Wars fans who are gamers. We want you to become a Jedi and go head-to-head with the dark side and have apocalyptic lightsaber confrontations and force frickin' choke people. We know that's what you want. Here you go. And they just gave you all of it. I mean, ass over head. They just went in on it, and I love that they did that, and I love that this game was out there, and I love that it came, because if they had not been brave and had not done something so cool, despite its flaws, you have to wonder if they'd have tried again the same way later, and some really amazing games came from the Jedi Sith power fantasy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was the first time I remember a Star Wars game that really let you experience that journey of becoming a Jedi Knight. And because it was this new character, this Kyle Katarn, it didn't feel like rehashing the story you'd already seen Luke follow of becoming a Jedi. It felt like your story. This was you were this character, discovering this brand new Star Wars adventure and following that path down, learning how to use the Force and how to use a lightsaber.
How to build it.
It was
and then can you think of that moment, right? Like, Empire Strikes Back, it's fair to say, is one of the greatest movies of all time. I think that's fair to say that. Mm-hmm. The moment. Luke jumping out of the carbonite freezer.
Yeah.
Vroom, vroom, Vader and Luke in blue and red. Before lightsabers clash, where they're just sizing each other up, and then they go. Like, as a kid, goosebumps. Right before you fight Jarek at the end of this one.
Yep.
Like when you're walking up to that battle, knowing what's about to happen, you got your force powers in your meter, you got your saber.
Yeah.
And you've got the last 20 hours of gameplay as your instructor. And you know you're about to go one-on-one with a Sith Lord, Darth Vader style, for the fate of the galaxy or some shit. I don't even really remember the plot.
Valley of the Jedi, something to do with, like, he's going to awaken evil Sith spirits, or I don't remember.
Who gives a crap?
It was kind of ancillary.
I mean, the goosebumps are so crazy at that point. It's like you're lifting 6 feet out of your chair. Sterling Archer quotes apply to that moment.
I mean, it was such a rush that you didn't even realize that the lightsaber on lightsaber combat in the original Jedi Knight was pretty bad.
Oh, it was awful. It's the power fantasy. It's the moment.
Yeah.
This game is lower on our lists because it was deeply flawed, and we're not saying it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it transcended the sum of its parts because of what it was, what it represented, and what it was fulfilling and actualizing for the gamer. Yeah. And it's a legend for that reason. It's a legendary title.
I totally agree.
I'm going to sing the praises of Star Fox 64 here before we sing the praises of the two games that defined 1997, not just to us, but to most people. Star Fox 64, it's just crisp. It's a great...
Another one that barely missed honorable mention for me.
It's just, it's eminently playable, perfectly designed, gorgeous. It had no flaws. Like, I can see why someone would think it was an unremarkable experience on the whole, but it had no flaws.
I think you're forgetting about Slippy.
Yeah, I mean...
Fucking Slippy. Slippy was... That's how you could tell... No, you could tell the pecking order in any group when you played split-screen multiplayer in Star Fox 64. Because usually the person that owned the console and their best friend would be Fox and Falco. Peppy is kind of the mid-tier person. Yeah. Whoever got Slippy was like the one that
the bottom bitch
was taking shit. Like the one that everyone else made fun of.
Slippy Toad.
Or if you showed up and like you were new to the group and it's like, oh hey, yeah, you get to be Slippy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been rolling with these dudes for a long time. Sorry man, you're Slippy.
Slippy, you got to save Slippy in the single player campaign, driving a tank,
just
saving Slippy.
Completely incompetent.
Yeah. But a brilliant fighter.
No,
Like
it was
brilliant-
it was an excellent,
a brilliant spaceship flyer.
excellent, rail shooter, spaceship, action packed.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
campaign, compelling.
Uh-huh.
The worlds were interesting. The enemies were interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Some really iconic bosses. I feel like
The boss actually looked like a thing instead of just a weird jumble of polygons like in the original SNES Star Fox.
Yup. Man.
Yeah.
You just rock solid title. Hard to point out any game design flaws. Gorgeous, iconic.
Yeah.
Brought a franchise into relevance. It's hard to say that Star Fox launched a movement, but Star Fox 64, there's a reason Fox was in Super Smash Brothers. So
Yeah.
bam, there you go.
Fantastic.
So the best games of 1997. I didn't put Age of Empires like you did because I didn't play it.
Yeah.
My Age of Empires career started at 2.
Which Age of Empires 2 is much better, but I still think the original Age of Empires is the best game of 1997 because there's a lot of reasons. So, for one thing, I think it was the first historical RTS that really paid attention to history.
I think it was.
I'd have to look back over our previous lists to see if that's completely true. Casey the Lore Dog is not impressed by Age of Empires. But I thought the way that it created the progression through the ages, where that was actually a gameplay mechanic, was such an interesting thing that would be, go on to be emulated. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna, upgrade my castle or my command center or whatever and unlock a bunch of new stuff. It was like you were actually progressing through these historical technology levels, which was really interesting. The way that it handled, resources were like different resources were going to be important in different ages. So if you had a lot of stone near you and not a lot of metal, you knew you were going to have an advantage early, but you either had to
expand.
You had to take some territory that had the resources you were going to need in the later ages, or else the guy who spawned next to a lot of that was going to be, was going to pull ahead of you. He might not have as many resources that were good for early game as you did, but if you let him survive, if you didn't take some of those resources from him, he was going to be kicking your ass, when the later ages came along. And it started the tradition, the Age of Empires tradition of having these really interesting historically based campaigns that, while they weren't 100% historically accurate, they did try to kind of roughly tell these interesting historical stories, which I really liked. The scale had gone up, not to the point of total annihilation, but definitely greater scale than we saw in Warcraft 2 in terms of the number of units you could have and just the size of the battles.
Some truly epic armies clash in Age of Empire games.
And just having different roles for all these different types of battlefield units. If you look at Warcraft 2, a cavalry unit is really just a swordsman with more health that moves a little faster. I feel like Age of Empires
a greater attack.
Created,
let's be real, the knight hits harder than the footman.
Yeah, Age of Empires created a niche for cavalry versus infantry versus ranged that wasn't just one of these has more hit points and more damage. You kind of had to think a little bit more in terms of that tactical flexibility in your unit composition.
It was also so wedded to history in a way that I loved. Take the single-player campaigns, for example. I loved those. The Age of Empire campaigns are an experience. They're special.
Yeah.
Almost on the level of a good RPG story.
Yeah.
And I remember learning a lot from Age of Empires, Age of Empires 2, Age of Empires 3.
And again, these aren't super sophisticated, super cleaving to
these aren't History
historical
Channel
detail.
documentaries.
But you could pick up some stuff from them.
Well, you know what they do? They were the flare guns for greater research. I remember Age of Empires 2,
trying to remember if I can remember all of the campaigns from AoE 1.
Yeah. We're going to go look at them.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull up the Wikipedia page, because I remember what most of the civs were, but it's been so long since I played that campaign that I'm trying to actually remember what... so it had Alexander, I think, was the expansion pack. It was the Egyptian, Greek, Babylonian, and Japanese. Which was I think it was the Greek one that I remember most clearly. But yeah, that was I mean, it introduced you to settings and characters that were historical that you might not have been exposed to previously. And
I remember Age of Empires 2, for example, actually reading about Saladin more.
And it introduced, I believe it was really the first RTS to introduce the concept of wonders, which were, these giant
things with huge
centerpieces that you could build up to. And just to use one as an example, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. That's something I had never heard of before I played Age of Empires, so I learned something from the game. I knew what the pyramids were, but yeah, Hanging Gardens of Babylon, I remember distinctly that my first exposure to that concept was in the original Age of Empires, and then I went and wanted to do some reading about it. Like, what is this giant thing that I just built? And then that led me to more exploration of, like, who the Babylonians were, and I think that's a lot of historically based games that get crap for not being, 100% historically accurate deserve credit for inspiring further exploration
I completely agree with you.
The characters, settings, civilizations, and concepts that they introduce you to. Civilization is another great example of that.
Great game. Age of Empires, it's iconic. It started an iconic franchise.
This was a very tough year to pick, but Age of Empires is my game of 1997.
My game of 1997 is Final Fantasy VII.
Which was number 3 for me. I still really like it.
What can you say about the game that launched the JRPG, about the game that launched the modern RPG? Everything about this game is... Here's the thing. I'll say it this way. There's a reason I don't think that Final Fantasy VII is the best Final Fantasy.
I still think 6 is superior.
I think 6 and 10 are superior. Everything about them was titanic, innovative, like, oh my god.
Yeah.
In terms of how great it was. Everything about Final Fantasy VII, though, was a landmark. Like, in the sense that you are playing history, that you are playing possibly, not the greatest game of all time, although I'm going to say this, certainly in the top 20, but possibly the most ambitious game of all time. And what its identity was, standing out from the sea of RPGs that existed before it, it honestly, it boggles the mind. It abandoned fantasy. First and foremost, the setting of Final Fantasy is almost completely modern, but it's not what Final Fantasy 15 did, which is take monsters and magic and set it with our technology, our social mores, our architecture style. It was a modern setting with like 1980s technology level, but all its own. Way more trains, way more airships, more...
You could see the progression that happened from, the first 5 Final Fantasy games, which all took place in kind of a medieval fantasy-type
sorcery.
Setting. 6 moved us ahead to, like, early modern. Yeah, like...
It was 6 is very
century.
steampunk.
Yeah. And then 7 was like, we're going to move it forward even further into, like, the machine age, basically.
A city that's a piece of artillery. Like, Junon is a cannon.
Yeah. They stopped short of computers, which I thought was
cool.
It's part of what made that setting unique. But yeah, they've got almost everything else.
They combined it with this wonderful fantasy setting. I thought their magic system was one of the most innovative I've ever seen. Like, creatively as a writer, I actually hold up Final Fantasy VII's magic system as an inspiration because it had nothing to do with frickin' magic. It was harnessing the mystical energies of the planet through materia, and that gave a character magical powers. There were no wizards. There were no mages.
Well, and materia added like this whole other axis of character progression and character customization. That let you, like, your end game Cloud might have a completely different
my end game Cloud was an absolute badass mage, and most people take him down the road of like physical brawler, especially because his Ultima weapon is the best melee weapon in the game by a stretch. So it's like, but my cloud was raining, had all the magic accessories, got all the magic ups, was raining Thundagas and summons on people. 9 going up everywhere for magical spells. And every character could be that. The amount of magical spells, by the way, dwarfs that of the Final Fantasy games that came before it. This game had almost a staggering amount of magical abilities.
A ridiculous number of summons.
And all of them beautifully animated.
Yeah. I mean, it got to the point where you were almost laughing at the end at, like, how elaborate some of these summon animations were.
Freaking dropping planets on the enemy.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go make a milkshake while this animation plays out. All right, and there's the 9999. All right, that's what I was looking for. Thank you, Neo Bahamut.
I needed to do that.
Appreciate your service.
What I love about it too is it made all that variety and the variety of characters. We added limit breaks, right? Which were these like embraced. I feel like it embraced the anime element of, because any setting for a JRPG that abandons sword and sorcery as thoroughly as Final Fantasy VII did is going to go in an anime direction. It embraced it by giving its characters sure kill shots. Like, every character had their own tree, had 7 or 8 special attacks where, that did more damage than anything else they can do, that had cool effects, that could change the tide of a battle, is one of the other things I loved about limit breaks. It's, shit could be going so south for you, but then Cloud or Barrett or Tifa or whatnot hits the limit, you critical hit with the limit, and now it's a new battle.
Yeah.
Like, new battle, all of a sudden, you're only through a quarter of your enemy HP, and you're halfway through your MP on healing, and, you're hurting. All of a sudden, you deal like 20% of the boss's HP in one attack, and it's an entirely new battle.
And they kept, I think, wisely with the Final Fantasy VI model of, like, you can't, like, assign jobs to a character. They each have a distinct mechanical identity that's going to stay with them. But then, as I said earlier, adding materia on top of that did give you kind of a way to customize them in the direction you wanted.
Yes.
Which was pretty cool.
Staggering depth to the combat.
Yeah.
3D, and staggering depth to the setting.
Staggering depth to everything. I mean, this is one of the first RPGs I remember playing where there was so much side shit to do, like... And
side shit going on that was narratively important is the thing.
I know people who played this game for, like, 200, 300, 400 hours, and, like, 60 to 80 hours of that was breeding fucking chocobos.
I know.
Like, that was such an in-depth side game with so much, like, nuance to it.
But you needed to do that to get that Knights of the Round, bro.
Yeah, and like, oh man, that, like, all the secret shit, it's kind of like what we were talking about with GoldenEye.
Fighting the weapons. This
concept, that embodied this era of, like, getting everyone's ultimate weapon, going off finding like, all the crystal weapons, ruby, sapphire, like... all this extra, just, like, hidden shit that you didn't have to do, but it was there if you wanted it, and you were rewarded for it.
So much variety, too, to the story. It's one of the things that I love about Final Fantasy VII that I feel like it did better than any other RPG in history, and I'll give it this, is its story had so much depth. Even though the translation from Japanese to English is fucking horrible, the story still had so much depth. It's like, on 1 minute, you're fighting through this city that's a gun, while this giant golem that defends the earth is slowly marching to this apocalyptic confrontation, and you're flying up in this airship, and the next chapter of the story has you in a submarine, floating to this underwater base to discover this mystery about the villain you're looking to fight, and then the next chapter of the story takes you into the center of the frickin' planet to fight this magical balls to the wall, you actually really feel like you're level 99 because of the shit that's going down. Death match with one of the top 5 greatest villains in gaming history, and I'm comfortable saying that. There can be no dispute that Sephiroth is a frickin' legend.
I remember that after the infamous scene with Eris, I remember thinking distinctly, this is the first time, regarding Sephiroth, this is the first time that I have ever encountered a video game character where I feel like if this person was real, I would kill him.
Yeah, I'd go for it. Like Cloud and Gang do.
I want to kill him so bad that I want him to be in real life so I can kill him in real life. Like, that's how much
And you want to talk about
hated
a
Sephiroth.
narrative drive.
Yeah.
Like, we have to stop this man.
Yeah,
It's not like get to the final level,
Yeah.
fight the final boss. It was really... And I feel like Final Fantasy VII actually did a better job of this narratively than even 6 did. Like, we have to stop this man.
Yeah.
It was compelling. It was like, this dude... And it wasn't... Kefka was pure evil.
Yeah.
And extremely narratively successful pure evil. Like, this dude was just a malicious, crazy, homicidal maniac, right? Sephiroth was dangerous.
Yeah.
He was messianic and unhinged and believed he was the hero,
Yeah.
right? And he wasn't committing genocide. He was killing people, you know, including several notable characters. But he wasn't, like, committing genocide or ending the world or anything. He had a goal that would have ended with the apocalypse. But he was this misguided megalomaniac. And that level of complexity to a villain, I can't remember seeing before this game.
And here's another, like, I feel like there are a lot of people who understand, like, the basic premise and the basic characters of Final Fantasy VII, but it's such a deep game that even, like, when I finally got around to playing it, which was probably 3 or 4 years after it came out, there was actually a PC port
the PC
that I ended up picking up.
And the PC port,
in
to
the
its
early
credit, was not
2000s.
crap.
No,
Usually
it was good.
PC port Final Fantasy games up until the recent Steam remasters were crap. But Final Fantasy VII was actually solid.
Even I'd seen people play it, like, by that point in, like, 2000, 2001, whenever it was, like, there was so much cultural penetration already of, like, Cloud and Sephiroth, and I was still, like, utterly surprised by so many elements of the story. Like, when you get into the connection between those two characters and how their paths intersect and the actual truth of the situation and how they kind of were set on a collision course.
The moment
it's so kind of just out of nowhere and unexpected.
It's a 4-act structure, the game, with the 4th act being the climax, basically.
Yeah.
The 4th act is short. It's the Northern Crater in the final battle.
Uh-huh.
The end of the 3rd act and the revelations that come in the end of the 3rd act are about as stunned and as, like, whoa, as I've been playing an RPG. I feel like Final Fantasy X, even with its big, 3rd act finale revelation, was even reaching back to Final Fantasy VII. Like, we're going to try to kick you in the dick about as hard. See if we can do it.
Yeah.
This game was just a pioneer, right? And I feel like, whereas Final Fantasy VI is a legend for execution, and Final Fantasy X is a legend for just all-around legend. It was well executed, brilliant story. It's, in my opinion, it's the tightest Final Fantasy title in that it hit home runs in all the major categories. Final Fantasy VII, it had execution problems. It was 3D, but it was fucking ugly. Like, but it was pioneering. That's where it's everything it did had not been tried before, and defined what came after it.
You were talking earlier about the giant battles, like the CGI cinematic scenes in this were, like, on another level from anything we'd seen before.
They were few and far between. But on another level.
Yeah, like, I think Warcraft is the only other game from the 90s I remember having as mind-blowing of, like, 3D cinematics as Final Fantasy VII did. Which we didn't really talk about when we discussed Warcraft 2, but man, those were some epic cinematics.
So yeah, Final Fantasy VII, game changer, man.
And I want to add one more thing onto here. The cast in Final Fantasy VII is, I think, one of the best RPG parties ever put. To the point that I would go beyond calling them iconic and say that they're, like, that
genre defining.
That team is, like, on a level with, like, the Norse or Olympian gods. Like, they're each such an integral part of that group. They work together so well. They each have such larger-than-life...
They were complementary. They had stories with each other.
Explosive identities.
Which I loved.
Yeah.
See, that's what was missing with Final Fantasy VI's ensemble cast. Final Fantasy VI did the ensemble cast
well, and it had some weak
better
links.
than 7.
Like, we can't even remember what
Well, and here's what I'll say this, is Final Fantasy VI was an ensemble cast. Final Fantasy VII is Cloud's story. You can't call that an ensemble game. You just can't. What Final Fantasy VII did better than Final Fantasy VI is every character had stories with the other, had banter with the other. Like, every character had a relationship with every character. It wasn't just a 12-person party. You got the sense that it wasn't just a 12-person party, like Final Fantasy VI was like a 32-person party, where some of these characters didn't even freaking know each other very clearly. Final Fantasy VII felt like a band of 12, the fellowship of the planet.
That's another great example would be, the Fellowship of the Ring. That's the level this group embodied. Yeah.
And I love that they all had interactions with each other and different relationships, and like, Kate Sith and Red 5 were bros, but Red 5 and Sid annoyed each other, and Barrett was kind of just annoyed with everybody, but really affectionate with Tifa, and it was just good stuff. And then feeling every character's pain, even Tifa, who doesn't like Aerith upon her death, like that made that death impactful. It wasn't just that the creators had the balls to do it. Mm-hmm. It was that you felt the team's pain because you saw that they were a family.
Yeah.
And that's a narrative home run. What else can you do in a story than that?
And as we mentioned earlier, there is an almost absurd amount of fan fiction that has come from these characters. You can find any combination. Like, you'd have to do like the factorial math of the number of possible combinations, but every single combination of these characters banging, it exists.
It does.
You can exclude and include any specific number of Final Fantasy VII party members, and there are chapters upon chapters of them banging.
We're talking all sorts of it. We're talking the candlelit, slow voice to men playing in the background, making love. Yeah. And we're talking the raunchy, you're spitting on stuff, making love. This is
you can find a version of 50 Shades of Grey featuring Vincent and
anybody.
Kate
Let's just
Sith.
say anybody. Anybody. Vincent. Anybody.
Yeah,
Vincent is a very popular character to dominate
He's
people.
He's the dark bad boy. Right? That's his thing.
Great game.
Yeah.
Great games in 1997.
So
we're gonna spin real quick to the best game Olympics, and not gonna spend too much long on them because not a whole lot of shifting has occurred.
So we've still got for platform the PC is still number one. Then we've got SNES and NES
still holding on.
PlayStation's climbing the ladder. Genesis,
it's falling.
Its time is over. I don't think it managed to cement a long-lasting spot in the top
N64 is
5.
making its prominent and bright flash in the pan. It will be gone in the 2000s, but it burned bright while it was here.
I think
and
N64,
we're starting to see that.
I don't think it's going to peak at number 8. It's currently at number 8. I don't think it's going to peak at number 8.
No, I don't think
it's
so
got
either.
some climbing to do. Nintendo obviously is still
dominant for us.
but Square was really coming up on their heels last week. Their lead the gap between them has shrunk a little bit. I don't know that Square is going to hit number 1 necessarily, but I think they've kind of cemented themselves that they're probably going to finish in the top 5. LucasArts still killing it. They're, again, going to be one that's going to kind of fall off more in the 2000s.
But they've still got points to earn. They will fall off, but they are not done. There are some LucasArts games coming up.
Capcom did some maneuvering thanks to Mega Man Legends. We've got Sonic Team and id kind of falling down to 5 and 6.
And they'll probably continue to do that.
Yeah, Blizzard, again, they're at number 8. They're not going to peak at number 8.
Nope.
By any means. And then, so in the Nation Wars...
The United States has come and knocked off Japan.
U.S. is like 5.5 points ahead of Japan. It's still a razor thin margin.
The United States has knocked off the king. This is the first time the lead has changed.
I think they actually got number 1 last week by a very small margin.
Well, they're keeping it then.
But so that's still going to be the really interesting is the 1 and 2 spots, and then the UK has managed to pull ahead. Thanks to Rare, who again is a company that still has points to earn, the UK has pulled well ahead of France for the bronze. And we're about to see, I'm pretty sure 1998 is the year that we're going to have more than 4 nations in the country of origin competition.
Will. So that's the Best Game Olympics, y'all. Thanks for listening. I'm really friggin' excited for 1998. One of the best years in gaming history. I'm actually going to this is a top 3 year in gaming history for me.
I'd say
That's probably accurate for me as well.
Like,
Yep.
this is going to be fun.
That might
We've
be
actually,
a special category we'll have to do at
Well,
the end
and
is like rank the best years.
we're even considering, we're not going to promise it, but we're even considering like diet special edition status for 98. I'm thinking that podcast might be longer than an hour.
Oh yeah, I think it just naturally will end up being longer than an hour.
Yeah, so look out for that, guys. And we are actively exploring bringing Talk Shop to you the right way on podcast format.
Yeah, we do want to. If you're watching this in the original release on YouTube, we're trying to get it together finally, where we can.
Yeah,
release it as
we're
audio only.
narrowing down our options. We're hoping that's in the weeks to come. It's imminent. We're figuring it out.
Man,
We haven't made a decision, but we're figuring it out.
1998 is like 3 of the greatest heavyweight fighters of all time in their primes,
Going
just
at
being
it.
thrown into the ring and like who's gonna come out on top? Like holy shit, dude! Like
It's a top 3. It's a top 3 year in gaming history.
Yeah,
like I'm confident in saying that.
Yeah.
This is.
I think there's a drop off after the obvious top 3, but those top 3 are like. They would be no contest number 1s in any other year.
Absolutely.
Like, holy shit. That's going to be a fun episode for next week.
And like I said, we're looking at diet special edition status. That episode is definitely gonna lean towards the longer side for Talk Shop.
Yeah, definitely. Be sure to check out loresworn.com. That's our website. We're at Loresworn Order on Twitter. I am at AsaTJ. DM is at DM Schmeier. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already. We're doing a lot of cool stuff with that. Hashtag Blame MacArthur.
We've been
You
twitching
get that
more.
reference if you watched our YouTube series.
We're twitching more and more.
Yeah.
And some stuff is coming to the website. And we're figuring out how best to do it, but there will be some information coming, maybe not in July, maybe not in August, but about Project X. It's coming. That info is coming. Speaking of Project X, we gotta go work on Project X.
We do. We've got a big old meeting to attend.
Right on. Well, we'll see you guys next time for 1998 and how friggin' fun that's gonna be to talk about.
Yep. Bye.